Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions, a brand new cybersecurity podcast that is all about access to ideas and people that can lead to results in your personal cybersecurity career and help you secure your organization. Hi, I'm Bruce Sussman. I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld. I am your host, and in today's session, we're opening the file on Aflac Global Chief Security Officer Tim Callahan.
Access granted.
Well, there are so many great security insights that came out of my interview with Tim. I spoke with him after his keynote at SecureWorld Atlanta, and here are two really interesting things I learned. First, if you bumped into him at a Starbucks, you'd never know he's the SVP and Chief Security Officer of a company with about $30 billion in revenue. Why? He is incredibly humble and down to earth. I really enjoyed our conversation. The second thing that I learned about Tim, and I think this is crazy, he had a long military career as an EOD. Now, what's an EOD? Well, in plain English, it's someone who disarms bombs. Can you imagine? From one high-risk career to another. I guess that wasn't enough, so he went into cybersecurity. And you'll hear that still influences, actually, how he thinks about his role. And by the way, how did he end up in InfoSec? Well, near the end of his military service, he had a chance to do some work for what was at the time the newly established Information Security Services. So that's how he got his cyber start, and he eventually ended up as a CSO at banks and then Aflac. Now, to the interview. In his own words, you'll hear his take on keeping your security framework fresh, on using threat intelligence and then automation to sort through all of that, asset management, and communicating about security, and more. You should know one thing. There's a lot of energy and collaboration at SecureWorld conferences. You will hear that in the background of our interview. I happen to know that Aflac is a NIST Cybersecurity Framework shop, so my first question to Tim is, why?
We adopted NIST. It was kind of fresh out of the bucket. In February of 2014 it was issued. And so we adopted it for a couple of reasons. We had Richard A. Clark, which you may remember was the National Security Advisor for President Clinton and President Bush. He formed a company called Good Harbor Risk Management. And he came in and helped us do kind of a tops-down governance assessment. And he suggested that we might consider that. Again, it was fairly new, but he predicted that it was going to probably become the de facto standard of care. And it has. I believe it has. It's if you listen to my presentation about defensibility, I think by adopting that, we've become more defensible of saying we've taken a standard that was meant for critical infrastructure. Although we're not that, we're applying that standard to our company, and we're infusing that with other applicable criteria, but it gives us and the board a simple way to measure our progress towards our goal and then to maintain that progress. So that's why we adopted it.
And how do you maintain progress with your adopted framework? I mean, that's a great question, right? And I was thinking as Tim was speaking about a conversation that I've had with UMass CISO Larry Wilson. He teaches a NIST implementation course at our conferences, and he has said this to me on multiple occasions. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is meant to be a living, breathing document. So with that in mind, let's go back to the conference where I asked Tim, how does Aflac keep the framework fresh?
We started down a path we established a maturity target, and we started down a path of meeting that target. But like everything else, I've become concerned with, up front we established good governance, good policies, good procedures. We've got process flows. And then along the line, you start losing some of that. So my concern was just that. How do I keep this, once we hit that maturity, how do I maintain that? So we actually started a program, the Cyber Assurance Program, which is a very formal program of deciding, and in this case, we decided on 137 critical controls once we define those controls, they all map back to NIST. Once we establish those controls, we've created test scripts for those controls, and we've created evidence, right? So we've got a cyber library of controls. We've got test scripts to test the controls. We've got evidence to back up the test, right? And then we assign control owners, natural control owners, whether they're in the business, in IT, wherever they are, and some in our group. And so with some frequency, depending on the level of control, we have the control owners test themselves, submit that evidence back to our central group who evaluates the effectiveness of that. So therefore, we know that we're continuing to maintain that control that we established, right? We've done it initially for 137 controls. Next year, we'll start filling those out with less critical controls. I'm not saying that we're going to have a ton of them, but I can foresee a library of probably around 200 or so controls.
200 controls? That is what we call a mature cybersecurity program, right? And here's something else that's fascinating. It's the way Aflac uses threat intelligence and the way the Aflac team automates millions of actions.
Threat intelligence to me is important because, when I told you, I've been in security for some time now, close to about 20 years in civilian world. It used to be information security was all about the defensive posture of your organization. It's you get this image of, a few guys in the basement crouched down watching the firewall, right? And security kind of grew out of that. As the threat has increased, we have to do things to be more proactive. We have to, get out in front of the threat. I mean, there's all kinds of debate about offensive security, and the hack back and stuff, and I'm not talking that's goofy, right? But what we can do is do those things that we can to get ahead of the bad guys to the extent we can, which brings in threat intelligence. You have to have some source that's watching the bad guys, watching their techniques, and then informing back to us what are they doing, what are they using, to the simple degree, what's the bad websites that are out there. And so you form all that information and you ingest it, but it becomes humanly impossible to do anything with that information. I mean, it's, you can fill a room full of people, and just the collaborative to make sure that I saw this, Harry, did you see that? Mabel, did you see that? What was it of any value? Just that process. So in my view, you have to have some kind of analytics engine to suck in that information, do analytics against a particular set of categories, and then produce information that becomes actionable. That has to be automated, or it's worthless. So in my view, threat intelligence becomes actionable once you put it through that process, and it applies to your organization, and to the extent that you can, you take automated action based on that information. So if it's from a good source, it's proved reliable in the past, it's credible and applies to your organization, when you can automate that into a particular action, like updating your proxy, changing a firewall rule, those kinds of things that you can do. We have a practice. So we're members of FSI-SAC, and so we share information through that. We're members of NCFTA. We share information through that. As we get indicators of compromise, as we get information, we have a method that we go back into our logs to see, have we been affected by that? In several cases, we found that a breach that happened at another company, the same threat actors, the same IOCs were being attacked to us, and our process updated and protected us. We didn't necessarily, because it's automated, we didn't necessarily see it at the time. You don't know it at the time, right? But when you figure out, or when you can see the evidence of it, it's at least encouraging that the program's working.
Well, that has to be a good feeling for any team. I mean, we build it hoping to block the attack, and when we looked at the data, it actually worked. I mean, that is what we call a cybersecurity win, right? Well, another thing that Tim mentioned goes along with other threat intelligence sessions that I've sat in on at our SecureWorld Cybersecurity conferences across North America, and it's this idea that you have to apply analytics to your threat intelligence, of course, but then you have to automate it as much as possible to actually put it into action. That way, it happens. Now, in a general business sense, I tend to think about a previous organization that I worked for. We'd have these meetings and go over best practices for the buzzword of the quarter or whatever, and everyone got a printout of these to take with them, right? Have you been to a meeting like this? If you have, then you can probably guess what happened. That's right, very little. I mean, you talk about it for a few days, you try and do it, it's hard to implement, and then the document and the best practices tend to go on top of the pile, which eventually get buried by other urgent information on your desk, and eventually it all gets recycled to make room for what's new a few months from now. So if I'm hearing Tim Callahan correctly, that is the magic of automation for already resource-strapped security teams. The best practices get implemented, and it protects the organization. That's really cool. All right, well, now let's go back to the conference where I asked him to quantify the number of actions his team is automating, and it is a significant number.
So we're up probably over about 40 million instances. And we're doing it, we had a team of 5 for a long time. We added one more person because we are doing a lot more with our other subsidiaries. But 6 people responsible for 40 million automated actions, right? And again, I mean, we obviously have, kickouts that now that a human has to get involved, but no room full of people could do that in the time frame we're talking. So I'm a big believer in automation. And what's really made it valuable is we've had so few false positives that, we've not, initially when we were talking about automated actions, our IT partners were very nervous about that. Wait, you've got to go through change control. And so we started very slow, saying, okay, let's let the thing run in this limited manner, in this limited environment, and let's just prove it out and see if we have any issues. And then as we gain confidence, as our IT partners gain confidence, we're able to do a lot more.
Very few false positives. Now, there are 4 words that every security team would like to say, hear, or see, right? In fact, it kind of reminds me of an article from our news website, which is SecureWorldExpo.com. It's one we published recently. It was just a little blurb about notification fatigue and all the ways that teams are getting around it by, in many cases, turning notifications off. So, yeah, there's a lot of challenges, right, in IT security that have Excedrin written all over them. And another one, I think, is asset management. I've heard a lot about this from cybersecurity professionals. And during his keynote, Tim Callahan actually shared some insights on how his team tackles asset management. So let's go back to the conference where he gives us a brief explanation of what it looks like at Aflac.
It's very simple to talk about. It's very hard to do, but really an organization needs to have a living inventory of IT assets, digital assets, I should say, because if we know what we should have, it's easy to program things that don't meet that, right? So it's like, this is the good list, anything not on the good list is bad. Simple and easy to program. Keeping the IT asset management system up to date is a challenge. We do have a little bit of a benefit because we've established a protocol where no device can touch our environment or authenticate to our environment if it doesn't have one of our security certificates on it. So anything that doesn't have a certificate gets shed. That helps us keep it fresh.
Now, think about the interview that we've done with Tim Callahan to this point. Have you heard a lot of security lingo? Did he use a bunch of technical terms? No. And he still got his point across. And this is a constant struggle in security, right? How do you communicate with those outside of IT and with the business? I asked Tim about this, and here's what he said.
I guess because I didn't grow up as a geek, I don't know a lot of the geeky language to introduce, right? I mean, that probably gives me more trouble with the IT folks than the business folks. But anyway, so I really try to, and quite honestly, I'm a pretty simple guy too, right? So I try to put it in language I understand and can communicate, right? I don't need to give the business, all the bits and byte kind of conversation. I need to say we have a threat actor doing this. In order to stop them from doing this, we need to do this, and that puts us in this kind of posture. I think it's very important. I also think it's important that we understand the challenges of our business, and I'm there to help our business meet those challenges, whatever they are. Right now, my team, we established a cybercrime prevention capability, and what that team is doing is enhancing the client experience in our interactive web experience, but at the same time serving the security need, right? So to the business, we're saying we're making it easier for our clients to come in for like our call center or for our claims process, to trust who that client is, that it really is them, so that they can go fast and service the client. And all along, we're meeting the security need too by protecting our environment from criminal activity.
Lastly, I interviewed Tim at a SecureWorld conference, as I mentioned, and he was there giving us time. He was talking with security vendors. He was making connections. Why? Why does any of this matter? And this is where Tim brought it back around to his days of disarming bombs.
It gets back to my disarming bombs. So everything can relate to disarming bombs. I mean, now we got cyber bombs versus physical. But knowledge was, and intelligence was the key to us literally living. And I'm not being over dramatic. Knowing what device we were, whether it's a terrorist device, whether it's an enemy, whether nuclear, biological, chemical, whatever, we had to absorb a lot of intelligence to be able to make the best decision we could in that environment. When you go to school or you learn about even our own U.S. ordinance, it's in pristine condition. When you find it out in the field, it's no longer in that condition. So oftentimes the procedures don't work. So we built up kind of an intelligence network, if you will, of information, so that when I saw that device with the fuse sheared off, but yet it's telling me to use a tool that shoots the device, it doesn't work. So how do I deal with it? So collaboration became the way we lived. Sharing, we had a facility that we could be out in the field and eventually go back with satellite, but in the early days, landline or whatever, to ask them, do you have any from your EOD reports, from the reports submitted, have you ever seen this device, this projectile, this whatever, in this condition? They had a method to sort through that information and come back, yes, since you can't do that procedure, do this procedure. So collaboration is kind of lifeblood. I've drug all that up into my information security career, and then I've got example. I mean, we could go on example through friends, networks, acquaintances that I've met. I'd call them up saying, "Look, I'm seeing this. Have you seen it?" They would call me back, or sometimes they'd just think to call me. We're seeing this threat. We have an idea that it's targeted to the insurance industry, or when I was in banking, you might want to look at this. So that collaboration is just so valuable to all of our success.
Well, I could not agree more. And actually, we could not agree more, because SecureWorld Vice President Brad Graver just came into the studio. Hi, Brad.
Bruce, good to hear you.
Thank you. Good to have you on the show. Interesting interview with Tim. I mean, his insights just incredible.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And the great thing about Tim is his willingness to share his expertise, his background, which is, it's fascinating.
Disarming bombs to cybersecurity.
Man.
He must like risk.
Yeah, I guess so.
Or minimizing it. Something.
I'm sure his insurance agent has a few conversations with him as well.
I didn't ask him, did you have Aflac when you were disarming bombs?
Right, yeah, exactly.
might have come in handy. Anyway, Brad's here because we have a really exciting announcement. SecureWorld's been around for a long time. This is our 18th year. Where we've been bringing leaders together at regional conferences, but you've got a really exciting announcement for the fall of 2019.
Yeah, actually, two exciting announcements.
Oh, great.
And one already happened. A couple of firsts for SecureWorld. In the spring, we had our first international conference in Toronto, and so we truly are becoming SecureWorld as we want to live up to that name. Second, we are branching out into New York. So New York City, if you can't make it there, you can't make it anywhere, right?
That's what I hear.
That's what I hear. So it's been a great reception so far. That conference is September 25th. You can go to our website to find more details, but the community's asked for us to bring our model to that region, and we're more than excited to do so.
Wow, that is fantastic. That's exciting, and I think that it's interesting to me that in the security industry, collaboration is kind of king, because it's not like you're competing against another company in the same industry, right? You're going against the bad guys.
Right. They don't care.
Right.
They don't care. So we really need to up our game, and I think SecureWorld has proven that through our regional conferences and through platforms like this.
Yep, it's exciting to bring you each episode of our new podcast, SecureWorld Sessions. And by the way, Brad, you mentioned upcoming New York, and I put a link in the show notes to not only the New York agenda, but all of our conference schedules, so you can check out when a SecureWorld conference is in your region. And by the way, we didn't want this to be just another boring security podcast where it's very technical and what have you. So I've asked every SecureWorld team member who joins me on the podcast to either come in with trivia or a joke. Brad, what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm probably the world's worst Jeopardy player. So
you're not going trivia?
So I'm not going trivia. I'm more on the joking side.
Okay, I could see that.
Here's one for you. You ready?
Okay, let's hear it.
A cybersecurity professional unfortunately passes away.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and ended up going to heaven. So
right.
That's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
For all the good works. There you go.
when this person gets to the pearly gates, what does an angel say to that person?
What's your password?
Hopefully it's not password.
Oh yeah, that's. No. I mean, yes.
Hold
out your finger. I don't know.
No, here's the response from the angel. You're gonna absolutely love it up here. You get to look through everyone's data.
Exactly. What you always wanted to do all those years you were securing it. Very good.
Hey, thanks for the courtesy laugh.
And thank you for listening wherever you are right now. Maybe you're riding the train or stuck in traffic. Perhaps you're doing errands around the house. That's when I tend to listen to podcasts. Also, can I ask you for a little bit of help? As a brand new cybersecurity podcast, would you please subscribe? And then would you also comment and like the episode and share it with somebody else in cybersecurity? That would really help get this going. And if you have feedback or topic ideas, we would love to hear from you. It's media@secureworldexpo.com. That's media@secureworldexpo.com. And by the way, I've included a link to our SecureWorld events calendar and conference schedule in the show notes. I was thinking about what Tim Callahan said, that relationships he has developed over the years have been a huge resource for him. So why not find out where your regional SecureWorld conference and community are located and start increasing those connections over the next year. In our next episode, it's my interview with cybersecurity thought leader and author Bruce Schneier. I spoke with him just before his keynote at SecureWorld Boston, and I will put it to you this way. He has very strong opinions on security. You are going to enjoy this interview. So for now, I'm Bruce Sussman, your SecureWorld Sessions host, and I'll